Public opinion means that all or most of the American people hold the same view on some public issue. It is very important to understand that it does not represent the single undivided view of the American people, but the sum of all of their views. Public opinions are views that relate to public affairs, which include politics, public issues, and the making of public policies. It is made up of expressed group attitudes, which can be anything from a protest, a billboard, or a vote for or against a candidate. You acquire political opinions through political socialization, which begins in early childhood and continues throughout your life. Political socialization includes age, race, income, occupation, residence, and group affiliations. However, the two most important factors are family and education. For example, you start to pick up on how your family views authority and rules of behavior, and education shows children that they will need to be good citizens. In addition, mass media, peer groups, opinion leaders, and historic events can also alter your public opinion.
Oftentimes, to measure public opinion, the process often used has to do with polling of a large amount of people. This is normally what is used to determine a sort of majority to see how many people are on the same page with their beliefs. Oftentimes, you'll see this sort of thing in pamphlets or magazines or even on the internet. There are polls that will tell you what the public majority is thinking about a certain candidate or where they stand on a certain issue, and this is normally the most popular form used to form a sort of public opinion of America. Even though these measurements of public opinion may form a sort of majority idea of what the people are thinking, it's not completely accurate as to what all of America thinks about a certain subject, because somebody may vote for a certain candidate without knowing anything about them. They may be influenced by their family or their friends without knowing anything that has to do with the candidate or why they are voting for them. People may vote for a certain candidate perhaps because they believe more in what they believe in than the other candidate, which does not necessarily mean that the voter believes in everything that the candidate they are voting for believes in. Oftentimes, interest groups will get together. They're organizations of people that are sort of in a like-minded mindset on a certain political standing. Overall, determining a majority of people in America and where they stand on an issue is not simply done by listening to the strength in voice of a certain group, though. Normally, polling is the most popular form of getting the public opinion of most people in America. Most often used are straw polls, and straw votes are collected to poll a large number of people by asking them the same question. However, this kind of relies more on quantity than quality, and so it's not always very accurate. More scientific methods have been surfacing lately that have to do with interviewing a sort of smaller amount of people to get a more accurate result using more scientific methods. A universe is typically the name that is given to a group of people that are being polled. It could be a very small number, it could be a very large number. If it's a large number, random sampling involves interviewing a part of the universe rather than the entire universe itself, because that could be very time consuming if your universe consisted of 200 people and you didn't have the time to interview every person. So a small sampling of that group may be taken to represent the majority of the vote. Another important factor to gaining accurate results is phrasing the questions that you are asking the right way. Normally, questions that have to do with things that are morally right or wrong will be answered largely in one way. People normally answering these questions in a way that is morally acceptable because they don't want to seem like bad people, which is not a very accurate representation of what they think might need to be done about an issue or where they actually stand on the issue. Even though polls and finding out public opinion is very important to finding a majority, it does not mean that America should be run according to just that majority, because if a majority consisted of maybe 51% believing in one ideal and then 49% believing in another, that's almost half of America not getting what they want, which is not necessarily the way that a democracy should be run. So government leaders, it's kind of their job to make the best possible decisions that they can make for America and not just strictly for one side of the spectrum if they get into office.
Mass media is any form of communications that can reach a large, widely dispersed audience simultaneously. This form of communication has a huge effect on politics in today's world, simply because our world is run mainly by electronics and technological advancements. There is at least one television in 98% of American households, and statistically are turned on for around 7 hours daily. This proves that TV, mass media, is a very important and effective means of communicating with the mass public. The media is often seen as a source of public opinion. Mass media's influence is still limited in today's day, though. Most American people do not follow public affairs as close as they should and used to. And those who do follow politics tend to select their own sources of information to bolster opinions they already hold. But given the limited time available to broadcast and the short attention span of the audience, most social media about politics is driven by the lives of the politicians and their private lives, which conforms increasingly to the image and status of each politician.